Welcome to the Outliers Podcast, celebrating the people, the skills, and the tools that create stories worth reading. A presentation of Outliers Writing University, where tomorrow's authors learn the craft.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Outliers YouTube channel and podcast series and our program, Get to Know. I'm your host, DP Lyle, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Kathleen Antrim.
Thanks, Doug. It is great to be here. And as some of our viewers know, we are doing a series on the authors who are nominated for Edgar Awards, which is coming up in just a couple of months. And I believe it's going to be the 80th anniversary of the Edgar Awards. It's a big year, a really big year. And today we have a very special guest. He's a New York Times bestselling author, and I'm so excited. He's got a couple books coming down the pipe. Scott Turow, welcome to Get to Know.
Thank you, Kathleen. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. Even better now having you here. So as some of our viewers know, I like to put our authors on the couch a little bit and dig into their background.
I paid for that, so,
So, yeah, I don't know how much this one's going to help, but our viewers like to hear about it. I'm going to ask you a little bit about your childhood.
Sure.
And I'd like to know if you feel that your childhood contributed to you becoming a writer. And, if so, how? Were you an introverted child? Were you an extroverted child? Did you happen to have imaginary friends? Tell us about it.
Well, yes, my childhood definitely contributed in two ways. The most direct way is that my mom had ambitions to be a novelist. And she never quite had the self-confidence and the gumption to do much about that ambition. But so I sort of took it on from her. But, she was a great reader. And, as I got older, we were always talking about books. And, that's where my story starts, is with my mom and her writing and her interest in writing. The other aspect of it, of course, is that most people who are writing fiction have stuff to work out. And I, in some ways, it was not an easy home. My dad was a troubled guy, and he took that out on his family. So, that piece of it also contributed in a way that probably I could have done without. But in any way, I don't know if I was a dreamy kid involved with my imagination because there were things in my present that I didn't want to deal with, or if I was just inclined that way. But I was definitely lost in my own head, and still am. If you ask Adrienne, my wife, she'll talk about me starting sentences and stopping, and she's got her hands and fists going, finish the sentence. But often I'll look at her and go, I don't remember. I was suddenly thinking about something else. But certainly I had imaginary friends when I was younger. I forgot Captain Billy was one of them. So
Captain Billy, I love
it.
I had Snarky and Hyacinth. So, did you have Captain Billy for much of your childhood, or did you lose Captain Billy around 8, 9, 10 years old?
Yeah, Captain Billy, flew off to wherever he was from. And in about that age range when it became, I remember being 10 years old, and I hated it when my mother dragged me shopping, but we were in a department store, Crawford's department store on Devon Avenue, for the old-time Chicagoans who may end up listening. And I was standing in front of a three-way mirror, and I was just kind of twirling around, and I became conscious that my mom was talking with the salesperson about my lost in space behavior. And it was the first time I was ever embarrassed by it. So probably the last time I displayed that way in public. But I recall I was 10. So
Isn't that interesting? So did you read a lot as a child?
yeah. As I said, my mom read to my sister and me, always. And I didn't like going to school because I was kind of a recalcitrant personality. I didn't like being told to sit in my seat.
Oh, Lord.
Do
I remember that.
So I frequently claimed that I had bad tonsils, but I would frequently take refuge in them. And my mother had one standing rule, which is, if you're not going to school, then you're going to be reading something. And I remember at the same time, age 10, that I was in front of the three-way mirror, my mom gave me the Count of Monte Cristo. She was a French major. And so, she knew Dumas, and she handed me this book. It was, like being under a tidal wave. I'd never experienced anything like that as much, despite all the TV and movies that I had watched. And I developed the thought that, God, if it's this exciting to read the book, imagine how much more exciting it would be to write the book. And there are often moments where I look up and, I'm having a bad day writing, and I see myself in the mirror, and I shake my finger. You're here because of the misguided ideas of a 10-year-old. Because there's a lot of hard work and sometimes a lot less excitement.
Well, I love that story about the Count of Monte Cristo. I mean, for me, it was Journey to the Center of the Earth, Jules Verne. That was the first what I call adult book that I'd read. I was probably 13, and I read it and was absolutely stunned that someone could tell this story.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I read, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yeah, I read all of them after that, exactly. So when did you decide, okay, I'm really going to do this? I'm going to sit down and I'm going to write a novel. What age were you, and how did you come to that?
Because you went to college and law school.
Law school and all that other stuff. But
yeah, well, the law school came later.
Okay.
I remember being in 7th grade and having announced that I was going to be a writer, sitting down and writing some kind of novella. And it was pretty good, but for one problem, which was it was basically plagiarized from something that I had read in school. So it was, my rewrite of it. But I've always had this really good memory, so the rewrite probably didn't stray very far from the original. And but it quickly dawned on me that maybe this is not what writing is about, is imitating somebody else. And so, I tried to write short stories in high school. I think in retrospect, they were really bad. Same as with the poetry I tried to write. But I went off to college. I went to Amherst College in Massachusetts, and I was still, determined to write. The dreamy, unfocused 17-year-old that I was, can be sort of proven by the fact that I got to Amherst and had not read the course catalog. And of course, it turned out that at Amherst College, there were no classes offered in creative writing. So I had gone with a dream and no way to fulfill it. Although it turned out that Amherst was a great place. They hired my sophomore year a wonderful writer and poet, a man named Tony Connor. And Tony ended up teaching in that area the rest of his life. Then my junior year, Tilly Olson came, who became, a a spiritual guide to me. So it worked out really well. In my senior year, they cut me loose from classes and just said, go write. So, which was good developmentally because I had, Tilly and two other wonderful professors, David Sofield and Leo Marks, who kind of guided my reading that year. And it was, I think, a very productive year. I wrote a lot. I learned a lot. And I slept late and worked late.
Yeah, you didn't have to sit in the classroom. Exactly.
Yeah, nice. So when did you then go to law school?
Well, first, every year in the English department, which was in Johnson Chapel at Amherst, there were posted these notices for the Stanford Creative Writing Fellowships. And, big red band, of course, I know today that I shouldn't call it red, I should call it cardinal, but that particular, vibrant red. And I saw the notices, and eventually I started paying attention to, well, who had these fellowships? And Tilly was one of them. Larry McMurtry was another. Tom McGuane, Robert Stone, who I was just gaga over by the time I graduated college, and Bob Stone ultimately ended up teaching at Amherst for a while. But there's just this slew of contemporary writers I greatly admired. Ernie Gaines was another one, Ernest Gaines, who'd had this fellowship. So I sort of said, again, in the stupid, older adolescent way, well, if I can get one of those fellowships, I'll be a real writer then. And I was lucky enough, I won one of those fellowships. So I went out to Stanford. I was a fellow for 2 years. And then to help the fellows who were interested in supporting themselves in an academic career, there were these little 3-year lectureships. So I also was lucky, and I got one of the lectureships. And so I taught creative writing at Stanford for 3 years as a lecturer in the English department. And I learned a lot doing that. The principal lesson was that I did not want to be an English professor. And I was not cut out for it in many different ways. And so I started casting around, trying to figure out what else would I like to do instead, since it was clear by then that my fiction was not going to support me. And, I started to kind of just look around, and I realized that most of my closest friends from college had gone to law schools. And the closest friends I was making in the Bay Area, leaving aside the many friends who were writers in the Stanford program, they were also lawyers. And I actually was much more interested in the problems they were working on than, the problems of English criticism that were the main meat of the English department. And my father hated lawyers. So that was almost an endorsement of a legal career. And I made what was, I think, but certainly it even shocked me in a way. I decided to go to law school. And it was a great decision for me. Among other things, the biggest problem that I had at Stanford wasn't finding a voice. I thought my voice was kind of there as a writer. I can go back and read what I wrote then, and I don't think it's all that different in terms of voice, sentence structure and syntax and rhythms from what I write today. But I hadn't found my subject. And when I went to law school, I went because I really was passionate about the law. And that really provided me with the thing that every writer needs, which is this sort of emotional centerpiece to her or his writing.
Well, if you were going to go back and tell your younger self or young writers, what's the one most important thing you wish you had known, 25 years ago or whatever, back before the first big bestseller? What would you have told yourself?
Order of 50, but anyway.
Yeah.
The one thing that I have learned by observation is that if you want to make a life in the arts, you have got to be able to take a punch, because there are very few Mozarts. My friend Amy Tan stopped writing, and she got published. I think Greg Iles, the late Greg Iles, another dear friend, was the same way. But most people struggle, and as my friend from Stanford, Tom Ziegel, likes to say, you got to log a lot of miles as a writer before you really have a refined sense of how to connect words with thoughts and feelings. And that means there's going to be a lot of rejection along the way. And if you don't have a passion that can get you through those valleys, you've got to be in trouble. So, you can wait for your break, and everybody needs one. Luck is part of the game. And, you've got to have a modicum of talent and certainly need to work hard. But, you need to be able to stand up to a world that is not particularly interested in you.
Wait, I like the way you said that. You've got to be able to take a punch, or more than one. Yeah, absolutely. Well, tell us about your new book.
What I'm working on now?
No, the one that is nominated.
Edgar Award.
There you go.
That's the book. So, Presumed Guilty picks up on the life of Rusty Sabich as the hero of Presumed Innocent. And I've written about Rusty 3 times now. I didn't want to write about Rusty right after the meteoric success of Presumed Innocent because, I had taken a lot of punches, and I wanted to find out what I could do as a writer beyond writing about Rusty. And, but 20 years later, I was ready to go back to him and this very familiar voice. And I wrote about him in a novel called Innocent. And at the end of Innocent, Rusty is a wreck. His wife is dead. He's just been released from prison. And he literally is running away from, my fictional home, Kendall County. He's decided to kind of be a fugitive and run away to the country, or as Huck put it, laid out for the territories. And he was just in such a low point. And, given the way Presumed Innocent changed my life, I always give Rusty Sabich a lot of credit for that. And I didn't feel good over time having left him at this low point. So I knew I was going to write about him again. But I was taking my time. And I knew he said he was going to go off to the family cabin in this semi-rural area, really kind of weekenders surrounded by farms. And I would think about him up there, and that resembles a great deal of, summer house my family has up in Kenosha County, Wisconsin. And I remember standing out in the front lawn one day thinking to myself, nobody writes about this place. It's, it's definitely not suburban. It's definitely not urban. It's not quite rural. people out there they feel ignored. They're somewhat angry about it. They don't like the city people. And I thought, this would be an interesting setting for a book. And I knew Rusty was there, so it was kind of logical who the protagonist was going to be. And I'd always, certain things in other books set you vibrating. And for me, a Chicago friend, Rose Ellen Brown, had written a terrific novel called Before and After, which ultimately Barbette Schroeder turned into a decent movie. And that was about a family when a son is suspected of a murder. And that theme, which of course turns up frequently in, suspense fiction, was just really attractive to me. But of course I didn't want to imitate Rose Ellen or my friend Bill Landay, wrote Defending Jacob. I wanted a story of my own. And eventually I realized that the story that I would tell would have Rusty Savage returning to the courtroom, and this time as the defense lawyer for his stepson-to-be, the adopted son of a woman he's been living with quite contentedly, and who ultimately is accused of murder. And so Rusty, who's not got a lot of experience as a defense lawyer, is begged by his fiancée to defend Aaron, the son, and he ultimately agrees to do it.
Wow.
Great premise.
Yeah.
Great premise.
Fantastic. I love that cover too.
Yeah.
I like it too.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So tell us a little bit about what you're working on right now.
Well, I haven't talked about it a lot, so except to relate this much. You have a very elderly lawyer, almost on death's doorstep, and his daughter visits him, having heard that he's quite upset about something. Another family member who he's close to has visited and reported back that, Pops is really upset. And the daughter says, "Well, what's bothering you, Dad?" And pulls out of his pocket a death notice. And there's nothing extraordinary about the death notice. And it goes without saying that at 94 years old, this man sees death notices for people he knew all the time. So his daughter says, "Well, what's the big deal?" And he says, "Well, that man was my client." Okay, a lot of clients. And he was murdered 60 years ago. And I saw the body. And neither of them can figure out why a death notice would be published 60 years later, with some biographical differences, but he's still, according to the death notice, and the one they find in the newspaper archives from when he died in 1963, still married to the same woman. So that begins the book.
Wow. Oh, that's fantastic. I love it. Well, you're certainly going to have to come back, and I'd love to have you back on to talk about that book more when you are going to be publishing it. And we're very excited for you with the Edgar Awards. Got our fingers crossed for you for Best Novel. And you've been a fantastic interview. So anytime you want to come on, we'd love to have you.
Thank you. I truly am honored by the Edgar nomination. I have a lot of respect for the award. I have read or am reading all of the other nominees, and that it's a justifiably a very I wouldn't need a lot of explaining if I end up not getting the award, because they're all wonderful books. But it's an honor.
Well, I have to ask you this. What were you doing when you heard that this book had been nominated for an Edgar? Where were you and what were you doing at that moment?
I was, returning email.
Yeah.
And I often return email in the middle of writing, when I need to pull away.
Right.
I figure I spend about 15 minutes out of every writing hour actually doing other things. So I was doing my other things, and I saw the note from my publisher. And to tell you the truth, I did what I think you ought to do, which is I said, "That's nice." I thanked him. I thanked my agent. Then I went back to work.
Yep.
Yep, absolutely.
Very cool.
Well, thank you again. And like I said, we'd love to have you back on, and we will be watching the Edgars and excited to see how that all plays out. But all the nominees, as far as I'm concerned, have already won just by being nominated. And category.
If you look at people's CVs in the future, they will say, blah, blah, blah was nominated for the Edgar as best novel of the year. So you're right. They have an accolade already.
It's there forever. Exactly. I got nominated twice. I got it in my bio. Never won though, but that's all right. Jeff Parker seems to win all of them, and I give him grief all the time. I think, "Oh, Jeff, give me one of them. Good Lord, he's got a mantle full, but he deserves it. He's one of my favorite." Well, we really appreciate you being here, and again, congratulations on the nomination. It's a big deal. And we do want to have you back with the next book. We'll sit down and chat about it, and then we'll learn more about the 60-year-old mystery, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Well, thank you both very much. Appreciate it.
But thanks, everyone, for being here here on Get to Know, here on the Outliers YouTube channel and podcast series. And as you know, we will be back with other shows, other interviews, and other fun stuff. So until then, keep reading, keep writing, keep having fun, and try not to get in trouble.
The Outliers Podcast is a copyrighted presentation of Outliers Writing University. All rights reserved. Learn more at outlierswritinguniversity.com.